Today we have a special guest, and I can remember many years ago being invited to Mike Smith's house for a big party in his backyard. And he had pulled up a big truck with a long flatbed, and I jumped up and did my bit, and then Mark Bilyeu got up and did his, and that's how I met Mark many years ago. Then, some years later, I was asked by Enoch Morris, who at that time was the director of the Juanita K, to sing, and I refused because I told him that I'd been told a long time ago by someone I respected to never sing in your own hometown because you'd never meet expectations, and I think he was right. But finally I said, look, if you can come up with a venue where we have blue jeans, t-shirts, eat some food, and then get up on stage. Well, next thing I knew, about a week later, he'd come up with blue jeans and barbecue or whatever. And I was kind of trapped, and I was real happy to do that because it was kind of special because it was me and Big Smith. So I got to see Mark yet again. As you know, Mark is really the leader, if not the founder, of Big Smith. Then some years ago, after that, I have been asked on a couple of times a year to speak to an advanced music class at Missouri State. Well, I kind of snuck in a little early, and I saw the back of Mark's head, and he's very recognizable, and as I walked up behind him, I noticed that he had a orchestral score in front of him, and it had the strings, it had the woodwinds, it had the brass, and he is sitting there thinking of a song and making notations all the way down. And I whispered to him, don't ever let your fans see you doing this or you'll ruin your reputation. And here we are many years later. Mark has continued to perform, produce, write, etc. And enough said. There will be upcoming shows in the next months here. Next month we have Bob Mabes, and if you remember, he was the original founder of, and help me, Chris? Bald Numbers. Yeah, I knew I could think of that. And then, of course, the next month we're going to have the one and only Chris Albert to talk about his amazing and many varied things in the world of music. And then Tom Peters is bringing us The Weavers, which is a very special thing. And what month will that be? Is that December? January. Okay, very good. Mark Bilyeu is a very special person.
Ask Tom about the night show.
About the what show?
Evening show.
The evening show.
Thinking about changing.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad I've got somebody who's prompting me here. Your board has met and has received a lot of information that a lot of people would like to have Music Monday in the evening. And we, after a lot of conversation, we realized that might be a good thing to do. But before we implement that, we want to hear from you. And so what we want you to do is go to our website and let us know by way of our email. It's very important that you do that because what you say, how you say it, will largely determine whether we change from noon here to 6 o'clock in the evening. My understanding is we will not have a dinner per se, but the bar will be open. I suppose appetizers may be available. And for a lot of people at work, they'd much rather have an evening opportunity to see our presenters than a lunch opportunity. So I beg you to please get on the email and let us know. Yes?
Will it continue to be Monday Monday, or
Yes, our plan at this time would be to continue on a Monday for many reasons. Many restaurants are closed. A lot of the bands and entertainers don't really perform on Monday, et cetera, et cetera. So it seems to work well. Anything else, Chris? Okay. Back to our featured presenter. And all I can say now is here he is, Mark Bilyeu.
Thank you. Getting the opportunity to perform with Robin at the Juanita K. Hammond's Hall for the Performing Arts is just one of the little pinpricks of light that I've experienced with Big Smith. It's taken me to some wonderful places. And that concert is a good example of all of a sudden you're in front of a crowd with someone who's one of the early makers and hit makers of rock and roll. So thank you for having me today. I've really appreciate it. I know I'm in good company. I will say that when I was 19 years old and I had my new Fender Stratocaster and I wanted to join a band to play some venues downtown Springfield, this gathering here is not exactly the demographic I had in mind that I wanted to appeal to, but time passes and we come to accept these things, and I really appreciate y'all being here. I'm going to start with some history because that informs so much of what I've done. My name is Mark Bileyu, and the Bileus have been in the Ozarks for a long time. I think if we trace back that paternal line where the name, holds true, I think it was maybe the 1840s is when they came into the Ozarks. And so music has always been a part of the Bileyu bunch. And, well, let's just get this out and done with. My dad, his name is Bobby Joe Bileyu. He was from a family of double-name people, Barbara Jean, Anita Kay. And then he married my mother, Connie, and Connie's actually, but they were a little more refined on my mom's side. Her given name was Consuelo Lane, and Lane was her middle name, and her maiden name was Bileyu. It's just one of these things that you see that happens around here. But we know the lineage, we know the family tree, and I guess one way of looking at it is that my parents are fifth cousins to one another. And so if you count cousins the way that I count cousins, that's not a whole lot of shared DNA. I mean, it's some, But it's just sort of the way the tree worked out. And so my mom was part of what you have the Hill Blues and the Hollow Blues. And the Hill Blues lived up on the plateau, wherever that starts, but actually it's a little south of there. So my mom was born and raised in Spokane, Missouri, south of Nixa, south of Highlandville. And my dad was among the Hollow Blues, and he was born along Bull Creek at a place called Dry Holler. That was what they called it. And so he was the Hollow Blues, and the Hill Blues were up here. The Hill Blues were a little bit better off and a little bit prouder of their station. And I suspect the Hollow Blues were no less proud, but maybe not had the means that the Hill Blues had. But anyway, they traveled in the same circles. Now, both sides of the family, both sides of the Bileus have a lot of music in them. But for Big Smith, the focus is on the Hollow Blues, my dad's side of the family. My grandpa, my paternal grandpa, his name was Hosea Bileyu, Hosea, like the biblical Hosea, but we all pronounce it Hosea, and that's just the way it is. He was a fiddle player. He played traditional fiddle tunes, and he entertained at Saturday night parties, things like that. And this was when he was a young man, and these kind of entertainers were much in demand. and he kind of served a role. Now, if you know anything about that, which I'm sure a lot of you do, is the Saturday night parties had a reputation for being wild occasions with drink and fights and this sort of thing. But yeah, he played he played Durang's Hornpipe and 8th of January and tunes like this, so people would have some music to dance to. And on a side note, it got to me that he would, him and a buddy or two would perform occasionally at the Rose O'Neill's place. The name, thank you, Bonnybrook. And so, and I'm sure I would love to be a fly on the wall for that night. But, and so I got, at some point I started looking into that, the traditional fiddle music down there in the Bull Creek area. And I've started tallying them up. And when you talk about my grandpa's generation, his brothers and his first cousins, the men of that generation, I think I tallied up 9 who were considered good enough, skillful enough traditional fiddlers to, be able to be in demand for these parties. In the 1940s, Vance Randolph, the regional folklorist, came upon Willie Bileyu, or Bill Bileyu, and Willie Bileyu had the reputation for being the best of the bunch. He was the best fiddler. And so someone pointed Vance Randolph, it was a WPA thing, I believe, to go record Bill Bileyu. And he did. And he recorded, Bill played 17 tunes for him, lightning fast, every one of them, and really good. And they're in the, they're registered in the Smithsonian, and I stumbled across that, and I ordered an audio tape, and they sent me a digital audio tape. And I popped it in, and it was wonderful, and it still is to this day. And so that's available to, everyone in our country, I suppose. And that was really great. And so I started digging around, trying to find recordings. I did find one of my grandpa. He stopped playing at a certain point because of the reputation that the fiddling music had, because he met my grandmother Thelma Keithley. And Thelma Keithley was, before that, the hollow blues and a lot of people around that area, weren't particularly religious people at all. But Grandma Thelma made sure to change that up and down the family tree, and as it still is today. And so Grandpa stopped the fiddling, but they would continue to make music, the two of them. And but I found a tape that one of my uncles who wanted to learn the fiddle pleaded with him, "Could you please play the fiddle? I've got my tape recorder." This was in the 70s. And so he picked it up, and it had been, maybe 30 years since he'd played. And so he did the best he could, and I've got that tape. Otherwise, I wouldn't have any idea. But yeah, he recorded about 8 tunes. Okay, so we're a long way from Big Smith, and I've got 45 minutes, so I'm going to try to hit the highlights. But anyway, the traditional aspect of our family's music is something that I treasure. So then my parents' generation, real quick. Like I say, the family got churched, and my dad is a very musical guy, and he discovered when he would listen to the radio that he could sing harmonies by ear. He would, like if there was a duo on the radio, he found that he was able to sing a third harmony part that wasn't on the record. He could sing along with it, and it would sound good. And so he decided to teach his younger siblings and some cousins and some friends how to do this, and he would make arrangements. He lived in Dry Hollow, and as you might imagine, there's no, they didn't have electricity running to the house. They had to go to the spring for water, and he had a radio that he powered with the car battery. And he would stay up, and he would get WSM out of Nashville, and they would play. He loved the black gospel quartets, Jubilee gospel, they call it. People like the Golden Gate Quartet and the Swan Silvertones. So that really influenced him. And so he put together a gospel music group out of the people of our family, and they were called the Waymakers. And the Waymakers were of a part of what we call Southern gospel music, which my dad is a lifelong fan of. And Southern gospel music is basically music very similar to the black gospel groups, except they're white folks. And this was essential at that time because of the situation as far as the Jim Crow laws and segregation and whatnot. But the Waymakers did pretty darn good. They were 4 boys, 4 guys. All of them, my dad was the oldest. I think he was 21, and the youngest was something like 13. But they ended up being the backup vocal group for Stan Hitchcock. And Stan Hitchcock was from north of Springfield, and he went on to have some chart hits. Honey, I'm Home, I think, was a top 40 hit. So local boy done good, Stan Hitchcock, and the Waymakers sang backup for him. And they recorded a double-sided LP. It was Stan's first record, and he sang on one side while the Waymakers backed him up, and the Waymakers had the other side. And it was for the Good Samaritan Boys Ranch. The album was made to raise money for that. And so that is the recording we have of that. And that recording, I think, if you want to point to anything that paved the way for Big Smith, it's that recording of our parents and aunts and uncles singing together with that harmony. And at some point, I sent the LP to a guy in Nashville who transferred it professionally from LP to digital audio, and so then I began to work with the audio, found another tape or two of the Waymakers, and I kind of put together a compilation CD. And so all the other stuff I have here is all on iTunes. But that one, if you're here about music of the Ozarks, I would be delighted for you to hear that. I've got only a handful of copies with me, but so we have a CD version of Stan Hitchcock's first LP along with the Waymakers, and I treasure that music. And every once in a while, if I have perhaps one too many beer, I like beer. And if I go down what we call, what do they call it when you go, a rabbit hole. If I go down a rabbit hole on listening to music late at night, somehow I always end up there, and that's right before I go to bed. It's with the Waymakers. I'm sure they appreciate that. But. Okay, so fast forward, I was born in 1970 here in Springfield, the St. John's Hospital. I grew up, the year I was born, my parents became the music ministry team for South Haven Baptist Church on South Campbell across from the Westlake Hardware. My dad was the music leader, Bobby Joe, and my mom was the piano player, Consuelo Lane. And they're both public school teachers. Dad taught at Parkview for 30-some years. Mom taught at Pipkin, then Central, and ended her career at Kickapoo High School, teaching vocal music. And then I have my brother, who was born in 1965 in Colorado. Then they moved to Division Street, which is where I've been given good information just in the last few months, is where I was conceived, on Division Street, which is, I never even thought to ask, but I'm glad I know. So South Haven, I was a church kid growing up, and Mom and Dad had me sing, taught me to sing the harmonies, put me up in front of the congregation to sing, probably before I was able to talk very well, and my brother as well. And Jody, I'm talking about, he was in Big Smith. And so, I was a church kid. Every Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday evening was at church. And we moved from the very far East Grand, 3147 East Grand, right before it runs out up against the dead end right there by Highway 65. We moved from there to southwest part of town out by Battlefield. And so I went to Cherokee Elementary, Junior High, and Kickapoo High School. And I liked, I graduated in 1988 in high school. It was an unfortunate time in music to come of age, I think. But I liked the same stuff that everyone else liked, and I would begrudgingly go to family gatherings and listen to them sing, and I would sing at church begrudgingly and all that stuff. But at some point, I realized that when I would go to these family gatherings, it slowly started to dawn on me that this was something pretty special, the way that my family would sing together, extended family, Thanksgiving and Christmas, and how they would just all spontaneously sing, lots of guitars, lots of a piano, and it was really pretty amazing music. And I realized that not everyone's family was like that, and it was unique. And so I started, coming to appreciate it. I started bringing my tape recorder to the thing, and I started recording the family gatherings. And someday I'll wade through it all and do something with that. I'm not sure what. But it was really a rich and wonderful and loving way to grow up with music. Let's see, almost immediately, I was kind of an audiovisual guy in high school. Well, that's putting it, generously. I think AV geeks is what we were called. And I loved recording stuff. And my first band in high school was called Johnny Comet and the Vomit Explosion. Sorry, that's what it was called. Tony Loudis, who's the media teacher, he said, guys, if you're going to play our freshman year, if you're going to play the talent show, you have to change the name. And my mom, who taught there, was in agreement, and so we just became Johnny Comet and the Explosion. Kevin Henderson was the lead singer. He works over at Drury now in the administration, English department. Couldn't sing a note, still can't, but it was a kind of a fun Weird Al Yankovic, This Is Spinal Tap, combinate punk parody band, and we would write goofy lyrics, and we released 3 cassettes in high school, and people thought it was kind of neat, and they actually bought some, and I had the bug from then on. I played in some bands in college, went to the music department there at SMS. The first band was this kind of alternative band called Mother Ruby, who is just one, I named it after my maternal grandma, a hillbilly. And we played alternative rock. And then next band was a folk rock outfit called Gypsy Scholar. I didn't come up with the name, but it was me and 5 other guys. And they said, I've been reading recently that the people that you make friends with at that age are likely to be the friends you keep with you the rest of your life. And that's true for these guys. We were 5 men, and we thought we were going to take over the world and all that. And we ended up doing a lot of fun shows, played in St. Louis, played in Columbia, and so on. But they started getting married, and one by one, leaving me behind. And so a subset of those people and some other people from the Springfield music scene decided to move to Austin, Texas in 1994. And that's the only time I've lived away from Springfield for any meaningful amount of time. Because Austin was a great music town. We went down there, we practiced, we wrote songs, we auditioned about 20 drummers. We finally found a drummer that we liked. We practiced for about 2 months. I was brimming with confidence. I knew that when the world heard this music that I was going to be on my way, and it was just a matter of people getting to hear it. And right before we scheduled our first gig, the drummer quit. And it was a tail between my legs sort of situation. I came back to Springfield. But while I was in Austin, it's an amazing music town. There was a group called the Bad Livers, I recall, and Danny Barnes, the banjo player. And Danny would have it's a hillbilly trio or a bluegrass trio, whatever, old-timey. And they played on 6th Street, a place called Emo's. And Emo's, these 3 guys with a banjo, upright bass, and a guitar player, filled this club up of these Austinite, young, hip people. There'd be 600, 700 people filled in this club to hear this music. And I was like, okay. So, and I told Danny, I took banjo lessons from Danny. I said, Danny, I really enjoyed my time with you, but I'm going to go back to Springfield, and I'm going to start a band with people from my family, my cousins. And he didn't care. He said, why are you speaking during my valuable time when you could be listening to me teach you? And I realized he was right about that. And so I did, and came back, was in a couple other bands, and at that point I met Lou Whitney at the studio downtown, and but anyway, the dream of putting the family band together was still real. And our aunts and uncles always said, Mark, or not me specifically, but you guys should start a band, because they would hear us singing at Grandpa's house, Grandma and Grandpa's house in Taneyville, out by the old wood stove, and we would sing Eagles songs or what have you, and we would harmonize just the way the Waymakers did. And so I'm not sure how conscious it was, but I was hosting an open mic night at the bar next door on South Street. And Matt Miller eventually, he said, well, why don't, this has kind of run its course, why don't you just do a solo night? Why don't you play by yourself? And I said, okay, that's great. Thank you, Matt. And I was playing a mix of, at that time, I was playing some, just all kinds of Americana music, roots music. I would play bluegrass songs, I would play folk songs, I would even throw in some gospel songs of not the, come to the front of the church and get your soul saved songs, but more, spirituals and things like that. Gospel songs for atheists, basically, So occasionally people would get up. My friend Jonathan Bentley, he's the youngest son of Dr. John and Roseanne, he got up and he would play percussion, and he played a washboard, like the Ballnobbers did. And he was an amazing, crazy washboard player. I wish I have a recording of that just to see how original and creative he was. But Jonathan is a brilliant songwriter on his own, and he wanted to start another band, so he was with us for a little while. And then this guy showed up one night. His name was Boudreaux. And Boudreaux was from the lake. He lived down by the lake, and he played the washtub bass. You might know what the washtub bass is. It's the old washtub with a broomstick attached by some kind of line, and by shifting the stick, you could change the pitch of the notes that you pluck with your fingers. And George Agernite, aka Lyle Mabe, played the washtub bass on the Ballnobbers. And it can actually make music. You can make music with the thing. You can create these low pitches. And Boudreaux was the best I'd ever heard. He played amazing washtub bass. But anyway, one night, Jonathan and Boudreaux and I were playing, and we were playing this mix of hillbilly, country, folk, gospel, and bluegrass. And I don't know, lightning struck, and the place went absolutely crazy. And I was like, ha ha, my plan has come true. This is what I imagined all along. It's because I'm so brilliant that I came up with this. And who knows? But it was great. And that lasted for a few weeks. And then one by one, Jonathan went to start a band called The Moons. And I'm not sure the timing on it, but Mike Williamson, who had been playing music around here for years, bass player, he's the big guy with the long hair, always wore the overalls, and I'm not sure how it happened, but he kind of elbowed Boudreaux out of the way. He's a big guy. And so he was playing upright bass. Jonathan left. We got my cousin Jay Williamson, Mike's brother, to play the washboard. And he'd played in a band called the Smarties, and he played bongos, and he was real good with hand percussion. And he took to the washboard immediately, and it sounded great. And eventually, this whole time, night after night, once a week, people were turning out for this thing and really going crazy about it. And it was so thrilling. And then Mike said, well, let's add your brother, Jody. And I was like, well, me and him don't really get along all the time, see. But he insisted, and he's a big guy. So we brought Jody, my brother Jody, into the band, and he played mandolin. And he had never played mandolin before. He played guitar and piano. But he, like Jay, he took to it wonderfully. And he basically come up with his style on stage, and has very little to do with the mandolin styles of, say, the bluegrass world, and it's really unique and kind of a cool thing. And so then we had the quartet, and the quartet was, at some point, the name Big Smith came from the overalls that Grandpa Hosey used to wear. And it was just the most successful thing I'd ever had experienced in terms of the way the crowd was responding. And people have asked me, why do I think that was? And who knows, luck, in the right time, in the right place. But it occurred to me, we've always had a love of this music, kind of the music from the hills of the Ozarks, and maybe the Ozark Mountain Daredevils embodied that. And then after they started, after the Daredevils in downtown Springfield, there's all kind of these waves of different styles of music. And you had the new wave with Fool's Face, and which I listened to and admired when I was in junior high, and then you had there for a while downtown Springfield. I don't know if you know, but it was like hippies came from all over the place. Nouveau hippies, neo hippies came. Because they go from town to town because it's a friendly town, meaning, I don't know, that they can enjoy themselves and not be hassled too terribly much. So for a while, there was like 3 big bands in Springfield that were playing hippie music, and that was kind of when I was downtown, and I would watch these shows, and I admire the way they made everyone dance, and the girls in the sundresses, and I that looks fun to me. And so I decided, so downtown Springfield, and I'm talking a lot. Oh my gosh. Okay. So, but anyway, the thing about Big Smith, there's so many cousins on that side of the family we could have chosen. There's 10 or 12 guys, and bless her heart, my cousin Joy Bileyu, who sang on the ball numbers for many years. We were the 2 youngest cousins. There'd been about 18 males, cousins on that side of the family, and then Joy, poor gal. But they all played music, and Joy sang on the ball numbers for many years. And but what Big Smith were the guys that were already playing music in Springfield, already playing live music out in downtown Springfield and other places. And we were very, very fortunate to have captured an audience, and it's kind of a lightning in the bottle type of thing. Can't fully explain it, but I was grateful. But what I was getting at was maybe there for a while with the Daredevils and other groups like the Undergrass Boys, and there was an emphasis on kind of music, rootsy music and folky music that maybe, when you listen to it, you can identify with the Ozarks as you're driving through the hills or whatever. And maybe that people had a sort of inner longing for that kind of music to be current, and that Big Smith sort of filled that gap maybe a little bit. And with the harmonies, a lot of people would say, you just remind me of when I was growing up and my grandparents would play music in the front room, and it just has that sound, So we continued to play, and it was great. We released our first CD in 1998. We recorded it at Lou Whitney's studio, and it took forever. And, even at the beginning, there were seeds of Big Smith's destruction. It's just a matter of how long can you enjoy the good things until, you don't anymore. But, of course, I had a very, very strong vision of what I thought the band should be. I was that kind of guy. I was kind of a control dude, and that's not always good. I still think that if a band has a central sort of leader who has a vision and who writes good songs and sort of even has an autocratic spirit, that the band's got a pretty good chance of working out that way. I hate to say it, but that's just the way it is. But so, I had a very strong vision. I wrote most of the songs, even though I wasn't, everyone else sang lead, but I was kind of in the middle, and I got recognized as the band, or sort of the leader of the band, I suppose, just because I was singing most of the songs. But anyway, the first CD was an exercise, an experiment in opening Big Smith up to the democratic process, and it took a long time, and there was lots of opinions in that room, and I won some issues I wanted, and I lost some, but somehow through that, we came out with an album I'm still proud of, and that's, it's probably Big Smith's best record, and it's sold the most, and it's got most of the hits. And I think it was some ridiculous number of CDs we sold on our CD release concert there on, the Juke Joint? Yeah, down there on the square. So let's see, I need to move quickly. We went, and so we started moving out of Springfield. We started wanting to conquer nearby towns. Eventually, we built up a nice regional circle of Springfield's good in that way, by the way, the kind of spoke of the wheel, where you can go to Fayetteville, Arkansas, Little Rock, Arkansas, Lawrence, Kansas, Kansas City, St. Louis, Columbia, Joplin. And if you want to go a little further flung, up into Iowa or over to Nashville, up to Chicago, or even down to, say, Austin, Texas. Springfield's a pretty darn good place to do that from. Eureka Springs as well. So anyway, we just kind of like, I don't know, like a Civil War general. We just kind of conquered one town at a time, just by performing and getting people to show up. And thankfully, when they did, they would tell their friends, and the next time more people would show up, and it was great. And so we did that, and we set up a nice little touring circuit, and we were doing well. We were admiring the Domino Kings, contemporaries of ours, which I have to say because Stevie Newman's here. But yeah, it was a great time, and we were sort of in that flush of that, initial success, and it was wonderful, and lots of laughter and a lot of hanging out after the gigs and all that. We recorded our second album called Big Rock, and real quick, we're Springfield people. I don't mean to come across as trumpeting my success, but this is the only time I've ever been asked to do this, you see, so I'm going to take advantage of it, I mean, my wife certainly, Mark, would you please list your accomplishments? And I'd love to listen to all of them tonight. She, by the way, she said she regretted that she couldn't be here today. She would have been here, but let's see, how did she put it? She didn't want to come, I think is what she said. But, how much? Good, I'll move through it. Okay. Since we're talking about Springfield music, Big Smith was something, once again, maybe a little trumpeting here, but I saw the culture around Springfield shift. I mean, a lot of the songs that we sang, that we wrote, were songs about being in the Ozarks and being proud of being in the Ozarks, or about things we'd done in the Ozarks. And so I think a lot of people, sort of identified us as like not authentic is too strong a word. I'm not going to try to claim that, but music of the Ozarks. And my uncle from Washington State came in kind of when Big Smith was just kind of taking off, and he was like, and he spent plenty of time in Springfield. He's like, Mark, how come so many people when I'm going around town are wearing overalls? I was like, I don't, but people started doing that. They started wearing overalls. It was like a weird culture thing, even like fashion. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So what was I getting at with that? Oh, well, and I was kind of a bit of an angry young man, and I and so some of my songs were kind of dirty old jams about the James River and how it's polluted, and Beryl Springs was about the development that was coming in because of the Branson boom messing up all my scenery and and people responded to that, and at the same time, though, downtown was sort of just getting going again. And I know a lot of folks you want to get the city going and get new businesses and get, we want to be like the bigger cities and see that growth, and which we do, of course. And I, sometimes I think like, oh, great, this is all we need to sort of represent Springfield as a bunch of guys in overalls that call themselves hillbillies, What a backward step, But I love downtown. I hung out downtown all the time, and I enjoyed watching the boarded up shops come alive. And I never had any, I don't have anything against that, and I just think, but I did like the idea of trying to do something sort of authentic that represented an aspect of Springfield's culture, and that kind of a nod to our origins, our history, and that Springfield's a big enough town to accommodate both, because I like to eat in those restaurants too. So that's all I had to say about that. By the second record, I'd lost some of the fight. I just tedious and laborious recording process, but the second album is called Big Rock. Not quite a sophomore slump, not as good as the first record perhaps, but nothing probably would have been. Still a pretty darn good record. We did our second record was a live gospel CD that we invited all of the extended family, all the Blues and related clans, to this little church called the Lone Star Church, way down by Forsyth, with these amazing acoustics, and we set up mics there, and Big Smith performed gospel songs, and the family sang along. Career move, probably not a good idea to be the second CD, be this sort of evangelical thing going on. Of course, that was not my emphasis, but I'm proud of the CD. I love to hear the family singing, and even today, anytime I sing gospel songs, no matter where I am, is on the spectrum of faith, be it way over here or way over here, singing that music is really comes natural to me, and I just love it. And then we did Big Rock in the studio with Lou, and let's see, after that, a German film crew, just trying to hit the highlights while I have time, came over in the winter of 2003. The director, Rick Minnick, had done a little feature about Branson, and my cousin worked there, and he's like, you should check out Big Smith. And so he ended up following us around with him and a couple of German sound guy and German cameraman, and they followed us around for a month in November of 2003. And the resulting documentary was called Homemade Hillbilly Jam. And I think, I'll be honest, I think maybe the director was like, maybe had sort of looking down perspective on the culture and the band. But he had to, when he came in to start getting ideas, he brought just a handheld camera, and he ended up in my grandmother's bedroom when she was on her deathbed, and we sang songs to her. And so I think at that point, he was like, well, I can't make a film about that. I can't do the film that way. And at the end, he had a bit of a crisis of confidence with that. He didn't know what kind of film he was making. I think he wanted to make a film that sort of made sport of us, But he couldn't do that with the footage he had, and so a whole another film resulted, and we went around some film festivals. It took us to documentary festivals all over the country, and the film was pretty well received, and I'm glad it's out there. There's a lot of great footage of our family singing, a lot of good performance footage of Big Smith. Homemade Hillbilly Jam came out in 2004, I think. We recorded a children's CD by ourselves with software. First time we did that, it was long and laborious. It was so much fun, and it's gratifying to have 20-year-olds come up and say, I listened to your kid CD growing up all the time, That's what I love to hear that. By this time, I was kind of about ready to give up the fight, just sort of worn down, and my problem artistically is that I'm never satisfied. I can never focus on one thing. I'm always looking where the grass might be greener and all that. So we took a little bit of a break there. I went to Mississippi and recorded a rock and roll CD of original songs with some players down there, and that was wonderful. Then, and to accommodate my restless spirit, we started bringing in some electric guitars. Jay moved to the drums. Jody started playing an electronic keyboard. And that was, our fans probably didn't so much care about that, but, I had to be happy artistically, so they accommodated me. And then we went through a long spell where we just went to the towns that we played one after another, just kind of showing up and playing the same stuff and getting paid. Not a lot of forward momentum creatively. And that became when I see a Ford Econoline van to this day, I think I have PTSD, But we sort of gathered ourselves back up. We recorded 2 more studio albums. The final one, we returned to work with Lou Whitney, and he produced it. And I'm so glad we did that. And we recorded one of his songs on there. And that was our last record. We played up until from 1996 until 2012. And our last show was opening up for the Ozark Mountain Daredevils in Kansas City. And that's how we went out. So then Dwight Glenn called me every other day to ask me when I was going to do a Big Smith reunion show. And finally, he wore me down, and December 31st, 2016, we did what we thought would be a one-off reunion at the Galois. We did it again, and we did it in 2017, and not public information, but we're doing it again this year. So you all heard it first. And by the end of this year, we will have played 5 shows as a reunited lineup. We did some lineup changes, but now it's ended up with 6 guys, all from that side of the family, all first cousin, and 3 pairs of brothers. Me and my brother Jody, Mike and Jay Williamson, and Rick and Bill Thomas. And we're not concerned. There for a while, we were, that's how we were trying to make our living, and we did it for a bit. But now we don't have to worry about those things. And everybody's landed in jobs and are happy with their families and doing well. And so now we get together and we play for the fun and joy of it, which is probably how it should have been all along. Gosh, so many things, of course, I wanted to touch on. I got married to Cindy Wolf, who is a songwriter and now a banjo player, plays her dad's banjo, and my favorite songwriter. And we have a band called the Creek Rocks, and we did a crowdfunding album. Our first album was called Wolf Hunter, which was we took traditional songs from the Ozarks that we gathered from the folk song collections of Max Hunter from here in Springfield, a traveling salesman who, like Vance Randolph, went around and recorded the old timers singing the old songs. And then John Quincy Wolf is from he worked at Lions College in Batesville, Arkansas, and Cindy grew up in Batesville, and he did the same thing. Both collections are online. The first one, because of Greene County Library and SMS, did all the work to digitize the old reel-to-reel tapes and create the website. So all the songs were drawn from those collections, and we had a great time making that at Lou's studio. After Lou passed away, we worked with Eric there. And so we're called the Creek Rocks is the name of the band, and Wolf Hunter is the one album we've come out. I'm trumpeting. September 2017 on the cover of Acoustic Guitar Magazine, Wolf Hunter, by golly. So thank you. So many adventures that I can mention along the way to kind of pass the time while I was sort of struggling to keep writing songs at the level I used to. We did Mayapple Records, which was, there's my 45 minutes. No, actually, I said that during when Robin was talking. I've got like 2 minutes left or something like that. No, I did not, according to the clock on the wall. I'll wrap up. But it started with this one fella, Dallas Jones, came to my house at what we called the Morlock Storehouse on McDaniel and Hampton, and with a 2-track recorder, we recorded Dallas's original songs, and that, along with a recording of a songwriter festival I threw down in Spokane, was the first 2 releases on Mayapple Records. Dallas Jones' first record. What'd you call it, Dallas? What's the name of the first record?
Well, it's called the Morlock Sessions.
Of course, the Morlock Sessions. Yeah. So still available, I assume. Go see Dallas Jones for the Morlock Sessions. But and I got into the producing role and ended up recording some albums, and that was wonderful. And Springfield's been good to me. I went to Little Rock, lived there for about 3 months recently, just as a kind of glorified house sitting gig, but came back to Springfield. Springfield's always been my home. It's been kind to me. I'm fortunate, and playing music with Big Smith, always greater than the sum of its parts, always has a lot more to do with the chemistry of the guys than it ever has to do with what I thought was, my creative whatever spark or whatever. So it's great to be playing with them again. And Springfield's an amazing town with amazing musicians, and I just look forward to seeing what happens in the future with that. And Stevie, we're playing, aren't we? Is he still here? What's our date, Stevie? Stevie and I started. Stevie and I, we were, like I say, we ran in the same circles. Him with the Domino Kings, which was brilliant, and me and him are going to do a couple of duo gigs coming up. That's what I can think of that's coming up besides New Year's Eve. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, it's great to see the familiar faces out there amongst you. Thank you for your support over the years. Thank you for allowing me to get up and shake my butt and make a fool out of myself for a living. I really appreciate it. Sincerely, thank you.
Questions at this time?
Sure, yeah.
Mark, one of the things I most admire about you, along with your music, is that you've immersed yourself into research.
Oh, right, right.
Would you tell our folks here
Sure.
the subject of your master's thesis, and you have some master's degrees?
Okay.
What's it all about?
Yeah, yeah. Well, like I said, when I started hanging around the family...
Pull the microphone down.
I'm sorry. When I started hanging out with the family, I record the family singing, and I realized this was sort of part of a dying tradition, the way that we would sing together, and that, it might not be around for very much longer. The Waymakers stuck together for 50 years before. My mom is she's in the late stages of Alzheimer's, but before that, they sang for 50 years together until finally they can't make those same harmonies they used to. So I realized, well, this is something unique, and I wanted to record all this stuff. And so I was kind of imagining myself in the pattern of Vance Randolph and Max Hunter, trying to start to collect these recordings. And so I was in the music department at SMS. I got my bachelor's degree in music education there. Went back, maybe out of boredom, out of nothing else, and started working on a master's degree in music theory. I was the first person to graduate with that degree when they started adding master's programs in the music department. But anyway, John Prescott there, he loved folk music. He grew up around Doc Watson in North Carolina. And I said, I love folk music. I would love to direct my studies towards that. And he said, okay. I got to work on the Max Hunter website a little bit. And he did everything he could to encourage me in that direction. And so I was telling you about the recordings of my grandpa Hosey. He played a tune called Durang's Hornpipe. And the recording by Vance Randolph of Willie Blue, he also played Durang's Hornpipe. And then there was another, Willie's brother, Glenn Bileyu. I came across a home recording of him. And he was also a very good fiddler, and he also played Durang's Hornpipe. So I was like, this is kind of like a Rosetta Stone sort of thing. Let me transcribe these recordings into notation and see what's going on here, see how it compares to fiddlers of other regions who also play Durang's Hornpipe. It's a popular tune. And just kind of, as far as Ozarks music, my goal in the day was to, what is it that makes Ozark traditional music? I mean, I think we can kind of know and feel it, but if someone asks me what it is, how do I do that? And I realized that the answer to that is not going to be simple. That's always going to be a very complex and rich tapestry of all kinds of things. Ozark's traditional music gets accused of being just an import from the people who couldn't even fit in Appalachia and had to run over here. And so Appalachia West sometimes, Ozark traditional music is called. And to a large degree, they're right. I'm not sure the conditions are such that the Ozarks, a lot of people were isolated here, and little pockets of styles could pop up, but I don't know that kind of where the traditional music meets the technology, like if that got recorded, if it ever existed, what is it that we can call Ozarks music? And I don't have an answer yet. I would love to do that. Continue working on that anyway. I think if anything, it's these traditional fiddle tunes that, because through that thesis that Mike brought up, I was able to say, here's what these three guys have in common, kind of from the same community. And I did notice a trend that people in the Ozarks played Durang's Hornpipe a certain way, not the way that people in Appalachia or Texas played it. There was a uniquely Ozarkian thing going on there. At some point, I kind of stepped back a little bit from that kind of. I thought I might teach college for a while, but I couldn't let go of performing and writing and singing, and so I hope to get back to that someday. But yeah, thanks for asking, Mike.
One more question?
Right here. Because you just mentioned the Ozark Book Center State Park down in Mountain View. I know you've been down there a fair amount.
Yeah. Jimmy Driftwood got that going, among the others down there in the 60s. They got that going.
Yeah.
The mission statement was to feature traditional Ozarks music, and which they still do. And Big Smith's played down there with Wolf Hunter and the traditional Ozark songs. Cindy and I are kind of made for that place, and so we've played down there. The new guy down there, his name is Darren Dorton, and he has opened it up a little bit as far as what they allow stylistically. They, nothing after World War II is allowed on stage and stuff like that. Which that's kind of unrealistic to maintain for too terribly long, I think. So they've kind of opened up stylistically a little bit, but it really is a neat place to be.
Mark, thank you very much. I know you could talk all day long because you've got a lot of stories to tell. By the way, on that second time that I played with you, Mark, when we were at the 180K, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that Stevie Newman and the Domino Kings backed me up. And since I'm an early rock and roll and rockabilly guy, I will go to my grave saying that Stevie Newman is one of the very best guitar players I've ever played with. Without question. The only thing that's different about him is we actually rehearsed at my house a few times, and he never played the same break twice the same, because it's part of his body, his soul. He plays it, and he plays it perfectly. Thank you, Stevie, indeed. And thank you, Mark. What a wonderful presentation today. Have a good trip. Be safe.